She said nothing was going
What's
on
going on,
between
YouTube?
you.
This is
And I want to believe that.
BBSP. One more time. Been absorbing all this basketball news and everything, and I know I've been behind with a whole lot of stuff and everything and all that stuff. But I want to get a few topics in real quick. You know, give my thoughts, give my reservations on everything, and now I got a couple things in my mind. I got two videos in mind, but the first one I'm doing today is the whole thing between Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas, right? He was recently on Club Shay podcast with Shannon Sharp, and he basically Isaiah gave the notion that Michael Jordan wasn't dominant in his era. It was the players he named were, of course, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Kareem. I think he had Dr. J4, and he had Mike 5.
Are you saying that there's
Thing is, though, like, here's what I think. Okay, he's not lying. He's not lying. Yeah, he's right to an extent, but at the same time, like,
shake your confidence in me and in our marriage?
his reasoning is kind of off. His reasoning is kind of off to me. You know what I mean? Because number one, like, by the time the bad boys were actually contenders, you gotta understand, like, this is about like the late 80s, like 85, 86. I wouldn't even give him 85, 86. I say about 87, 87 to 1990 to 1991. 86, 87 to 1991. They were contenders. Thing is,
I mean, I have been on the lookout for red.
yeah, you did have the Sixers in the early mid 80s with Julius Erving, Andrew Toney, Mark Averoni, Daryl Dawkins early on, though he ended up getting traded away for in favor of Moses Malone. You know, they won a championship in 1983, but after that season, you can see started to see a decline in that group, and by the time they had declined, the Pistons were starting their run. So really, to say that Dr. J was like a challenge, was like in his group challenge to actually have a team to go through. I really can't say that. You really can't say that because they really didn't meet in the playoff setting. They didn't really meet, like, as far as whatchamacallit, you know. But thing is, for me, his reasoning is off because really, when you think about it, they really didn't have any, like, playoff meetings or anything, or playoffs or anything as far as actual having a game of importance during that era. I mean, you could say like Boston, you could say teams like Milwaukee, and of course the Bulls later on in that decade. But as far as the Sixers go, I wouldn't really say that they were actually rivals. I mean, they may have met a couple times in the regular season, rather, but as far as being actual rivals, I can't say that. I can't say that. But getting down to the gist of everything, right? He's right to an extent. Isaiah Thomas is right to an extent. But you got to wonder, man, with the way Isaiah flip flops his reasoning, his discussion, as far as like who he actually thinks is the greatest of all time. you got to think that there might be a little bit of resentment there because you got to think when Jordan was first coming into the league, Jordan came in the league. He was a superstar right out the gate, you know. And that first year, he won over all the fans in Chicago to the point where when Isaiah went back to Chicago, he always got that warm reception, that warm, you know, the hometown player coming back, putting on a show. But when Mike came on the scene, he was basically kind of null and void, and that had to have like got to his ego a little bit. That had to have get to his ego a little bit. That had to. That had to affect his ego. Had to bruise his ego, and you got to think too. He was in on that whole shutout game back in the 1985 All Star game, where they basically Jordan got shut out, along with him, George Gervin, a couple other players. Magic, I think Magic had a little bit something to do with that, but yeah, there was, you know, he was basically the ringleader of that whole fiasco. And there's always, I feel like there's always been some resentment between Isaiah and MJ as far as like actual like competition within the game, and there's some real disdain off the court too. But thing is though, by the time 1989 came, that year, you could easily make the argument that Jordan and the Bulls were the Pistons' number one nemesis because at that point, Jordan was more often than not considered the best player in the league. The Bulls were obvious contenders by that point, even though you had other teams in the Eastern Conference. You had the Cavaliers, you had the 76ers, you had the Knicks, you know, to a smaller extent. But it was basically by that time the Bulls had started to rise as perennial contenders, championship contenders. And you add to that, you added fuel to the fire, and then you had the whole Bulls Pistons rivalry. Thing about it is that Isaiah, a part of him still resents Jordan for his success early on. And the way he stormed into the league, the way he came into the league, and the way the notoriety, the adulation he attained. And you got to think that to this day, he may not admit it, he may not say it publicly, but thing about it is, there's still some resentment, some resentment, some envy there. You know, basically because Jordan was recognized as the best player in the league by that time. By the time the Bulls were actually contenders, and you can make the argument the Bulls were up 2-1 in the 1989 Eastern Conference Finals, and then a year later, the Bulls pushed the Pistons to 7 games. So each and every year, they were getting closer. Besides, outside of the first meeting, the first meeting back in 1988, from 1989, them next two series, you could tell that the Bulls were slowly but surely chipping away. And thing about it is, there's some other underhanded stuff that Isaiah did as well. You know, walking off the court in 1991 when they got swept, when the Bulls finally broke through and swept. You know, which a part of me gets, but then you gotta put your ego aside. End of the day, you know, and you can't just like walk off the court just because you got to disagree with another player. I understand because Jordan made a comment saying they weren't worthy champions and all that stuff, and they'll be happy once they get rid of them. You know what I mean? But you got to think from his point of view, Jordan's point of view, they were out to basically manhunt it and then take his head off basically every game. So you know that wasn't when you think about it. Some of the stuff that the Pistons did, they played hard. Don't think about it, but some of the things they did within the game wasn't really basketball. I gotta be honest. I gotta keep it 100. Some of the things that they did that wasn't basketball. That was like straight off the street, backyard brawl. And end of the day, somebody's going to get hurt. When you going up in the air for a layup, and somebody's coming crashing down and jumping on your back. That's not really basketball. I can see a hard foul. A hard foul, you going in the air and you tap them on the wrist. You you tap them on the leg. You grab them before they go mid-flight. Hey, I got no problem with that. But while they mid-flight in the air, and you hitting them with forearms and you push them while they mid-flight, that goes beyond the game, man. Yeah, the Bad Boy Pistons, while they were great, I'll never take anything away from what they accomplished. They did push the envelope. They really pushed the envelope as far as like dirty basketball and all that stuff. And you got to think, next move might end my career. You know, I'm crashing down on the floor. I can get up with a broken wrist. I can get up with a broken jaw. Case in point, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen going for a layup and damn near had 2 stitches right on his chin. So, yeah, I mean, end of the day, man, like this whole thing with Isaiah and Jordan, hey, they just need to sit down one of these days and let's just hash this shit out, man, because it's been 30 years since all that happened, more than 30 years since all that happened. You understand? And there's some things that Isaiah did were scumbagish, and some things, if I'm gonna keep it 100, that Mike is doing is kind of petty, you know. But like I said before, this whole thing about Isaiah saying Jordan wasn't a challenge and Mike wasn't really competition. Like, I just find it real funny that he's saying this. He's saying all this now, and like little more over when I say going all the way back to like 10, 15 years ago, he was vouching for Jordan. He was really vouching for Mike. I mean, I don't know. Has he always felt this way, or he was trying to be politically correct? I have no idea. But for me, it's like the whole thing is petty, man. This whole thing is petty. You know what I mean? I understand being, having a, oh well, having some type of a grudge when it comes to on the court, but for you not to be objective as to what actually happened, you understand? Like I feel like he's being kind of dishonest. Now he may not be, like he's right in terms of Mike and his teams weren't really that great, but my kind of argument to that is by the time the Pistons finally broke through and won a championship, the Bulls were already contenders. And that same season they won that first championship, 1989, the previous finals, the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls had them down 2-1. So I don't know, man. End of the day, they just need to one of these days just sit down, really hash things out, sort of like how Magic and Isaiah did, how Kobe and Shaq did. You understand? But hey, and that's just me. Tell me what y'all think.